Is he my son, Shanice? Hunter Caldwell's voice trembled, cutting through the vibrant hum of Stanford's graduation stadium. The air buzzed with families cheering their graduates. At 45, the tech billionaire stood tall, success etched in his tailored suit. Yet his heart was hollow, haunted by his divorce from Shanice Brooks. Scanning for his niece Lily, his eyes caught a woman in a crimson dress, her dark skin glowing, braids elegant. Shanice, 38, his ex-wife, clapping proudly. Beside her stood Miles, 18, white-skinned, hazel-eyed, dimples mirroring Hunter's. His breath hitched. "Shanice, long time," he stammered, approaching. Her gaze hardened, fingers gripping her seat. "Hunter, didn't expect you." She introduced Miles, her graduating son, but her avoidance sparked suspicion. Shanice nodded curtly. "Not here. Later." His world tilted. A son revealed in one glance. What secrets lie beneath her silence? Will Hunter reclaim his family? Vote 1 if you're hooked, 0 if not. Stay to unravel the truth. The roar of the Stanford Stadium pulsed with life, a sea of families waving banners, their cheers mingling with the triumphant swell of music. Graduates in cardinal gowns streamed across the stage, clutching diplomas, while the sun bathed the scene in golden warmth. Hunter Caldwell, 45, stood among the crowd, his tailored navy suit a stark contrast to the casual exuberance around him. A tech billionaire, his name was synonymous with success, but his heart carried a void, carved by the loss of Shanice Brooks, his ex-wife. He was here for his niece, Lily, a computer science prodigy graduating today, yet his mind wandered to the past, to a love he'd let slip away. His eyes scanned the stands, searching for Lily's familiar smile. Instead, they snagged on a figure that made his breath catch. A woman in a crimson dress, her dark skin radiant, braids swept into an elegant updo. Shanice, 38, stood clapping, her pride palpable. Beside her was a young man, 18, white-skinned, with hazel eyes and dimples that mirrored Hunter's own. Miles. The name hit him like a thunderbolt when Shanice introduced him moments later. The boy adjusted his graduation cap, dropping a small notebook, which he retrieved with a quick, curious glance at Hunter. The crowd's chatter faded as Hunter's world narrowed to this moment, his pulse hammering. "Shanice, long time," Hunter managed, his voice rough, stepping closer. Her eyes, once so warm, were guarded, her fingers tightening on her chair. "Hunter, didn't expect you here," she replied, her tone clipped, betraying a flicker of unease. The air between them crackled with unspoken history. She gestured to the young man. "This is Miles, my son. He's graduating today." Miles offered a polite nod, his hazel eyes studying Hunter with a mix of curiosity and reserve, unaware of the storm brewing in the older man's chest. "Is he my son?" Hunter asked, the words tumbling out, raw and urgent. The question hung heavy, silencing the stadium's din for him. Shanice's jaw tightened, her gaze darting to Miles, who was now distracted by a classmate's wave. She nodded, barely perceptible, her voice low. "We need to talk. Not here. Coupa Cafe, 30 minutes." She turned away, guiding Miles toward the exit, leaving Hunter rooted, his world tilting. A son, 18 years old, a mirror of himself, and he'd had no idea. Whispers rippled through nearby spectators, recognizing the billionaire. But he barely noticed, his mind reeling with the weight of a truth unveiled in a single glance. Hunter weaved through the crowd, his polished shoes clicking on the concrete, each step heavy with shock. The stadium's vibrancy, banners fluttering, families embracing, felt distant, like a scene from someone else's life. He reached his car, a sleek black sedan, and sank into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel to steady his shaking hands. Miles' face flashed in his mind, those dimples, that familiar crease in his brow. How had he missed 18 years? Shanice's guarded expression haunted him, her pain a silent accusation. He'd lost her to his ambition, to his mother's meddling, but a son? The thought was a knife, twisting deep. The drive to Coupa Cafe was a blur, the bustling streets a mere backdrop to his churning thoughts. He arrived early, The cafe's warm lighting and soft hum of conversation, a stark contrast to his inner turmoil. He chose a corner table, away from prying eyes, and ordered a black coffee, though his stomach churned too much to drink. Shanice entered, her crimson dress swapped for a simple blouse and jeans, her braids loose framing her face. She was still breathtaking, but the hardness in her eyes spoke of years of hurt. She sat across from him, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Hunter asked, his voice barely above a whisper, afraid of the answer. Shanice's gaze pierced him, her lips a thin line. "You don't get to ask that after what your mother did." Her words were a lash, cutting through the air. She leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. "After our divorce, Evelyn came to me, offered me $1 million to disappear, said it was for your own good, to keep your focus on your empire. When I refused, she threatened to bury me in court, to take my child away." Her fingers trembled, betraying the calm she projected. Hunter felt the blood drain from his face. "I didn't know," he said, his voice cracking. "I swear, Shanice, I didn't know." He searched her eyes, desperate for her to believe him. "I tried to find you. You vanished. No calls, no trace." Shanice's laugh was bitter, her eyes glistening. "You were too busy building your legacy to notice. And when I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't risk losing him. So I left, raised Miles alone. He's brilliant, Hunter, top of his class, and he doesn't need your world's chaos." Her voice softened, protective, as she spoke of her son. Hunter's chest tightened, guilt and rage warring within. Evelyn's interference was a betrayal he couldn't fathom. "Why come back now?" he asked, his voice raw. Shanice hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "Miles earned a full scholarship to Stanford. He's graduating today and is a guest speaker for his class. I couldn't miss it." Her pride in Miles was fierce, but her eyes held a warning. "He doesn't know you're his father. He thinks his dad was someone who left long ago. Don't ruin his day." "I won't," Hunter promised, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to know him, Shanice. I've missed 18 years. She studied him, her expression unreadable, then nodded slightly. "Tomorrow at the Stanford Arboretum. You can meet him as a friend, nothing more. If you hurt him, Hunter, I'll make sure you regret it." She stood, leaving him with the weight of her words, her silhouette fading into the cafe's crowd. Hunter sat frozen, the coffee untouched, his mind a storm of regret and hope. A son. Miles was his, a young man with his eyes, his smile, graduating from Stanford alongside Lily. The realization was both a gift and a wound. He'd failed Shanice once, lost in his pursuit of success, blind to his mother's schemes. But now a chance, fragile, fraught with pain, lay before him. Could he earn Miles' trust? Could he mend what was broken with Shanice? The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Hunter felt a flicker of purpose beyond his empire. He stood, resolve hardening, ready to face the truth and fight for his family. The hum of the Coupa Cafe lingered in Hunter Caldwell's ears, but it was Shanice Brooks's words that echoed louder, each syllable a shard of glass in his chest. Her guarded eyes, the way her fingers had clenched the table's edge, haunted him as he sat alone, the untouched coffee cooling before him. She'd confirmed it. Miles, the young man with his hazel eyes and dimpled smile, was his son. 18 years lost, stolen by secrets and betrayal. The cafe's warm glow felt suffocating now, its chatter a distant murmur against the storm in his mind. Hunter's heart pounded with a cocktail of guilt, rage, and desperate hope, his fingers trembling as he replayed their conversation. Shanice's pain, raw and unyielding, was a mirror to his own failures, and he knew he had to face the truth she laid bare. Shanice had left minutes ago, her parting warning ringing. "Don't hurt him, Hunter." Her silhouette had vanished into the crowd, leaving him to wrestle with the revelation that his mother, Evelyn Caldwell, had orchestrated a decade-long deception. $1 million offered to erase Shanice from his life. Threats to strip her of her child, his child. The thought made his stomach churn, a bitter taste rising in his throat. He'd been blind, consumed by his empire's demands, never questioning why Shanice had vanished so completely. Now the weight of that ignorance crushed him, each breath a struggle against the tide of regret. He leaned back, staring at the cafe's ceiling, memories clawing their way to the surface. He saw Shanice as she'd been, vibrant, fierce, her laughter filling their late-night walks across Stanford's campus. They'd met at a conference, her sharp mind challenging his ideas, her passion igniting something he'd never known. Their love had been a whirlwind, culminating in a quiet wedding under starlit skies, a moment of defiance against his mother's disapproval. Evelyn had never said it outright, but her disdain for Shanice's middle-class roots and dark skin had seeped into every interaction. Cold smiles, pointed remarks about fitting in. Hunter had ignored it, believing love would conquer all. But when his company skyrocketed, he'd let ambition consume him, leaving Shanice to face Evelyn's venom alone. "You didn't fight for me," Shanice had said, her voice cutting like a blade. She'd recounted the day Evelyn appeared, her polished heels clicking on the floor of Shanice's modest apartment, a check in hand. $1 million to start over," Evelyn had offered, her tone dripping with condescension. "Hunter needs to focus on his future, not a failed marriage." Shanice, proud and unbroken, had torn the check to pieces, but Evelyn's next words chilled her. "Stay and I'll ensure you lose everything, especially that child." Pregnant and alone, Shanice had fled, choosing safety for her unborn son over a battle she couldn't win. Hunter's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles whitening. His mother had stolen his family, and he'd been too distracted to notice. Shanice's return wasn't planned, she'd explained, her voice softening when she spoke of Miles. He'd earned a full scholarship to Stanford, his brilliance shining through despite the odds. Today, he'd been a guest speaker at the graduation, his speech on innovation captivating the crowd. Shanice's pride had glowed, but her eyes held a warning. Miles was her world, and Hunter was an outsider, a stranger who could disrupt the life she'd built. "He thinks his father left long ago," she'd said, her gaze piercing. "He's sensitive, Hunter. Don't break his heart." The words landed like a punch, each one a reminder of the years he'd missed. Miles' first steps, his dreams, his triumphs. Hunter's throat tightened, a lump forming as he imagined Miles on that stage, unaware of the father watching from the stands. Those hazel eyes, that dimpled smile, Hunter saw himself in them, a reflection of what could have been. Guilt gnawed at him, but so did a flicker of hope. He could be more than a shadow in Miles's life. He could be a father if Shanice allowed it. Her distrust was palpable, her posture rigid as she laid out the terms. "Meet Miles tomorrow at the Stanford Arboretum, but only as a friend. One misstep," she'd warned, "and you're out." Her protectiveness was a wall, but Hunter glimpsed a crack, a fleeting softness when she spoke of Miles' potential, a hint she might want him to know his son. He stood leaving the coffee behind and stepped into the fading light outside the cafe. The campus buzzed with post-graduation revelry, students laughing, families embracing, but Hunter felt detached, his world reshaped by a single truth. Miles was his son, and Evelyn had kept them apart. Rage simmered beneath his guilt, directed at his mother's manipulation and his own complicity. He'd let her control too much, his choices, his life, while Shanice had fought alone to protect their child. The injustice burned, fueling a resolve he hadn't felt in years. He would face Evelyn, demand answers. But first he'd meet Miles, prove he could be the father he'd failed to be. As he walked toward his car, the evening air cool against his skin, Hunter's mind raced with questions. What was Miles like? Did he laugh like Shanice? Dream big like Hunter once had? The notebook Miles dropped at the stadium flashed in his memory, its cover scrawled with intricate sketches. A small detail, but it felt like a lifeline, a glimpse into the young man he longed to know. Shanice's warning echoed, "Don't hurt him," but it was her pain that cut deepest. She'd built a life without him, raised a son who thrived, and yet her eyes held a wound that mirrored his own. Could he heal it? Could he earn her trust? Hunter slid into his sedan, the leather seat cold against his back. His phone buzzed, his assistant Tara checking in, but he silenced it. Tomorrow at the Arboretum, he'd meet Miles, not as a billionaire or a stranger, but as a man seeking redemption. The thought terrified him, a fear sharper than any boardroom battle. He'd failed Shanice once, let ambition and his mother's schemes tear them apart. Now a second chance dangled before him, fragile as a thread. He gripped the wheel, his resolve hardening. He'd fight for Miles, for Shanice, for the family he'd lost. But what price would he pay to confront Evelyn's betrayal? What truths would Miles demand when the time came? The morning sun filtered through the sprawling oaks of the Stanford Arboretum, casting dappled shadows on the path where Hunter Caldwell waited, his heart a tight knot of anticipation and fear. Shanice's warning from the cafe, "Don't hurt him," echoed like a pulse, her guarded eyes a reminder of the trust he'd shattered years ago. Miles, his son, 18, white-skinned with hazel eyes and dimples that mirrored his own, was no longer just a name or a fleeting image from the stadium. Today, Hunter would meet him, not as a father, but as a stranger, a friend of Shanice's, per her strict terms. The weight of that constraint pressed against his chest, mingling with a desperate hope to glimpse the young man his son had become. Every rustle of leaves heightened his nerves, each step toward this moment a battle against the ghosts of his past failures. Shanice appeared first, her dark skin glowing in a simple green blouse, her braids swaying as she walked with measured steps. Beside her was Miles, tall and lean, his white skin catching the sunlight, his graduation gown replaced by a casual jacket and jeans. His hazel eyes flicked toward Hunter, curious but reserved, a notebook tucked under his arm, its edges worn from use. Hunter's breath caught, the resemblance striking, a younger version of himself, yet shaped by Shanice's fierce love. "Hunter," Shanice said, her voice steady but laced with caution. "This is Miles." She paused, her hand resting lightly on her son's shoulder, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "Miles, this is an old friend of mine." "Hey," Miles said, his tone polite but guarded, extending a hand. Hunter shook it, his palm clammy, feeling the strength in Miles' grip. "Nice to meet you," Hunter managed, his voice rougher than intended. Miles tilted his head, studying him. "You were at the graduation, right?" "Kept staring at Mom." His bluntness caught Hunter off guard, a spark of Shanice's wit in his words. Hunter forced a smile, his heart pounding. "Yeah, it's been a while since I saw her. Surprised me." Miles nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if sensing more beneath the surface. Shanice's gaze darted between them, her fingers tightening on her purse, a silent plea for Hunter to tread carefully. They walked along the Arboretum's winding path, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine. Miles led the way, his steps confident, pointing out a rare plant he'd studied for a project. "I'm into biology," he said, his voice warming as he spoke of ecosystems and conservation. "Mom says I get my curiosity from someone." He glanced at Shanice, who offered a tight smile, her eyes warning Hunter not to push. Hunter's chest ached, the unspoken truth a heavy veil. Miles' passion, his quick mind, felt like a mirror to Hunter's own youth, before ambition had dulled his spark. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What drove Miles? What were his dreams? But Shanice's rules held him back, a leash on his longing. "You sound like you've got big plans," Hunter said, keeping his tone light, though his heart thrummed with pride. Miles shrugged, a dimpled smile breaking through. "Maybe. I've got a project lined up with some classmates, including Lily. She's cool, by the way." "Said you're her uncle?" Hunter nodded, warmth flooding him at the mention of his niece. "Yeah, Lily's a firecracker. You two in the same class?" Miles grinned. "Yup. She's always pushing me to think bigger. Says I remind her of someone." He laughed, oblivious to the weight of his words, but Hunter's breath hitched, the resemblance a quiet thunder in his soul. Shanice's eyes softened briefly, but her posture remained rigid, a sentinel guarding her son's heart. Hunter caught her glance, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Miles was their creation, a blend of their strengths, yet a stranger to half his story. The thought pierced Hunter, guilt mingling with a fierce desire to be more than a bystander. He pointed to Miles' notebook. "What's in there? You dropped it at the stadium." Miles hesitated, then opened it, revealing sketches of plants and detailed notes. "Just ideas," he said, almost shy. "I like figuring out how things connect." Hunter's throat tightened, seeing his own meticulous nature reflected. a bond he couldn't yet claim. As they paused by a shaded bench, Lily appeared, her curly hair bouncing as she jogged over. "Uncle Hunter! Miles, you didn't tell me you knew him," she teased, her eyes sparkling. She studied them, then laughed. "Wow, Miles, you're like his mini-me. Same dimples." Miles rolled his eyes, but a faint blush colored his cheeks. Shanice tensed, her fingers gripping her purse tighter, and Hunter felt a pang of fear. Lily's playful comment skirted too close to the truth. "Just a coincidence," he said quickly, meeting Shanice's gaze, silently promising to honor her boundaries. Lily shrugged, oblivious, and pulled Miles into a debate about their project, their easy camaraderie, a reminder of the life Hunter had missed. The moment lightened the air, but Hunter's heart remained heavy. Miles' curiosity, his quiet intensity, stirred a longing so deep it hurt. He wanted to tell him everything, to claim him as his son, to apologize for the years stolen by Evelyn's schemes. But Shanice's presence, her watchful eyes, held him in check. She'd fought alone to raise Miles, her strength a fortress he admired and feared. "You're good with him," she said quietly as Miles and Lily wandered ahead, her voice softer but still edged with caution. "But he's sensitive, Hunter. He's built a life without you. Don't disrupt it." Her words were a knife, cutting through his hope, yet they fueled his resolve. As they parted, Miles turned back, offering a half smile. "You're not bad for an old friend of Mom's. Can we hang out again?" Hunter's heart leaped, a fragile bridge forming. "I'd like that," he said, his voice thick. Shanice nodded, a reluctant approval, but her eyes held a warning. One misstep could end this. Hunter watched them leave, Miles's notebook tucked under his arm, Shanice's protective hand on his shoulder. The Arboretum's tranquility felt like a lie, his emotions a tangled storm of hope and fear. He'd met his son, felt the spark of connection, but the path to being a father was fraught with Shanice's distrust and Evelyn's looming shadow. The Stanford Arboretum's quiet paths faded behind Hunter Caldwell as he drove away. Miles' half-smile and Shanice's cautious nod etched in his mind. The fragile connection he'd felt with his son, those hazel eyes, that dimpled grin, ignited a warmth in his chest, but it was laced with fear, a tight coil of dread that he might fail them both. Shanice's warning, "Don't disrupt his life," was a chain around his heart, her guarded eyes a reminder of the trust he'd lost. Now as he navigated the bustling streets toward his Palo Alto penthouse, a new storm loomed, one that threatened to shatter the delicate bridge he'd begun to build. His phone buzzed relentlessly, a flood of notifications that turned his blood cold. A headline screaming across social media, "Billionaire's secret son spotted at Stanford graduation." The Arboretum photos, his, Shanice's, Miles, were everywhere, and the world was watching. Hunter's grip tightened on the wheel, his knuckles whitening as he pulled into his underground garage, the sleek walls a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. He opened the article on his phone, his heart sinking at the grainy image. Miles laughing, Shanice's protective hand on his shoulder, Hunter's stunned expression. The caption speculated wildly. "Who is the mystery teen with tech titan Hunter Caldwell?" Comments poured in, some cruel, labeling Shanice a gold digger, others questioning if Hunter had abandoned a child. Each word was a dagger, slicing through the hope he'd felt hours ago. Miles, his son, was now a headline, and Shanice's worst fears, her son's life exposed, were coming true. Guilt surged, a bitter tide. He'd brought this scrutiny upon them, his fame a curse he couldn't escape. He stormed into his penthouse, the city skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows, a mocking reminder of his hollow success. His phone buzzed again. His assistant, Tara, her voice urgent. "The board's freaking out. Stock's dipping. Your mother's demanding a meeting." Evelyn. The name ignited a fire in his chest, rage at her betrayal mingling with his own shame. She'd stolen 18 years of his son's life, and now her shadow threatened to ruin this fragile chance. He silenced the call, needing to see Shanice, to fix this before it spiraled further. He texted her, his fingers trembling. "Saw the news, I'm coming to the hotel. We'll handle this." Her reply was curt. You'd better. Miles can't be hurt by this. The hotel lobby was quiet, its polished floors reflecting Hunter's strained expression as he approached Shanice's suite. She opened the door, her dark eyes blazing, her braids pulled back tightly, as if holding her anger in check. "This is exactly what I feared," she hissed, her voice low to avoid waking Miles, who was asleep in the next room. "Your world, cameras, headlines, it's poison for him." Her hands shook, betraying the calm she tried to project, and Hunter's heart twisted at the pain in her eyes. He'd seen that look before, years ago when he'd chosen work over her, leaving her to face Evelyn's threats alone. Now he'd dragged her son into the spotlight, a betrayal she hadn't deserved. "I didn't want this," Hunter said, his voice raw, stepping closer. "I'll fix it, Shanice. I swear." Her laugh was sharp, cutting. "Fix it? You can't buy your way out of this, Hunter. Miles is starting his life, his career, his dreams. He doesn't need to be your scandal." The word stung, a slap to his hopes. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, the weight of her words crushing. "I know," he whispered. "I'd give anything to protect him." Shanice's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, then hardened again. "Then do it. Keep him out of this circus." Hunter's mind raced, searching for a solution. "I can arrange an interview," he said, his voice steadier. "Wired, someone we trust. We'll tell our story, set the record straight without exposing Miles' identity. No details about his plans, just us taking responsibility." Shanice's eyes narrowed, skepticism etched in her features. "You think that'll stop the vultures?" she asked, crossing her arms. "They'll dig until they know everything." Hunter met her gaze, his resolve firm. "I'll hire security, keep them away. I won't let this hurt him." Her silence was heavy, a test he felt in his bones. The door swung open, and Evelyn Caldwell stepped in, her designer coat immaculate, her face a mask of calculated concern. "Hunter, darling, we need to manage this disaster," she said, ignoring Shanice's glare. Hunter's rage flared, his fists clenching. "You don't get to manage this," he snapped, standing to block her path. "You caused this. You paid her to disappear, threatened her with our son." Evelyn's composure faltered, her lips thinning. "I was protecting your future," she said, her voice cool. "A child would have derailed everything." Shanice stepped forward, her voice low and lethal. "You mean my son, Evelyn, the one you tracked, threatened to take from me. He's not your pawn." Hunter's heart pounded, his anger a white-hot flame. "You stole 18 years of my son's life," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "You had no right." Evelyn's eyes flickered, but she held her ground. "I did what was best for you," she insisted. "This situation can still be contained." Shanice's laugh was bitter. "Miles isn't a situation. He's my son, and you'll never touch him." Hunter stepped closer to his mother, his voice low. "Leave, now. This is my family, and you're not welcome." Evelyn's gaze hardened, but she turned, her heels clicking as she left, the door's slam echoing in the silence. Hunter turned to Shanice, his chest tight with guilt and determination. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "For her, for this mess. I'll make it right." Shanice studied him, her eyes searching for sincerity. "You'd better," she said softly, her anger softening into weary hope. "Miles deserves better than this." Hunter nodded, his heart aching for the boy asleep in the next room, for the woman who'd fought alone. He'd failed them once, but the fire in his chest burned brighter than ever. He'd protect Miles, shield Shanice, no matter the cost. The echo of Evelyn's departing heels still rang in Hunter Caldwell's ears as he stood in Shanice Brooks' hotel suite, the air thick with the aftermath of her intrusion. The social media storm, the headline "Billionaire's Secret Son," had exposed Miles, his 18-year-old son, to a world of scrutiny, and Shanice's fierce words, "Miles doesn't need your circus," burned like a brand. Her dark eyes, blazing with protective anger, had softened only slightly at his promise to shield their son, but the weight of her distrust pressed against his chest. Now as he drove through the quiet streets to a nearby nature reserve where he'd agreed to meet Shanice and Miles, Hunter's heart thrummed with a desperate need to prove himself. The fragile connection from the arboretum, Miles' curious gaze, his dimpled smile, felt like a lifeline. But one wrong move could snap it. The reserve's trails wound through towering trees, their leaves whispering in the breeze, a serene contrast to the chaos of the headlines. Hunter arrived early, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth, his nerves a tangled knot. Shanice had texted, her message curt. Miles wants to talk. Don't mess this up. The words were a gauntlet, her faith in him paper thin. He paced, his mind replaying her accusations, his failure to protect her from Evelyn, his absence in Miles's life. Guilt was a stone in his gut, but beneath it flickered a spark of hope. Miles had asked to meet again, his half-smile a beacon Hunter clung to, a chance to be more than a stranger. Shanice arrived, her green blouse catching the sunlight, her braids swaying as she walked with Miles. His white skin glowed faintly, his hazel eyes scanning the reserve with a quiet intensity, notebook clutched in hand. Hunter's breath hitched, the resemblance striking. Those dimples, that familiar crease in his brow. "Hey, Hunter," Miles said, his tone casual but tinged with caution, a young man testing unfamiliar waters. Shanice stood close, her hand hovering near his shoulder, her eyes locked on Hunter with a warning that needed no words. "Thanks for coming," Hunter said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought we could walk, maybe talk about your biology project." Miles' eyes lit up, a spark of interest breaking through his reserve. They strolled along the trail, the crunch of gravel underfoot grounding Hunter against the tide of his emotions. Miles spoke animatedly about a conservation project, his voice alive with passion as he described restoring local ecosystems. "I've been studying how small changes can save entire habitats," he said, flipping open his notebook to show detailed sketches of plants and wildlife. Hunter's heart swelled, pride mingling with a pang of loss for the years he'd missed. "That's incredible," he said, his voice thick. "You've got a real gift for this." Miles shrugged, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Mom says I'm too curious for my own good." Shanice's lips twitched, a fleeting softness, but her eyes remained vigilant, guarding her son's heart. As they paused by a quiet stream, Lily bounded over, her curly hair bouncing, her energy a stark contrast to the tension between Hunter and Shanice. "Miles, Uncle Hunter," she called, grinning. "Didn't know you two were hanging out." She nudged Miles, teasing, "You're totally his mini-me, you know. Same dimples, same stubborn look." Miles rolled his eyes, but a blush crept up his cheeks, his hazel eyes flicking to Hunter with a mix of curiosity and unease. Shanice tensed, her fingers tightening on her purse, and Hunter's heart sank. Lily's playful comment brushed too close to the truth. "Just a coincidence," he said quickly, meeting Shanice's gaze, silently vowing to respect her boundaries. The moment passed, but Hunter felt the fragility of their connection, a tightrope he walked with every word. Miles' curiosity was a bridge, but his guarded demeanor hinted at questions he hadn't yet asked. "Mom says you knew her at Stanford," Miles said, his tone probing as they resumed walking. "What was she like back then?" Hunter's throat tightened, memories flooding. Shanice's laughter, her fierce debates, the way she'd made him feel alive. "She was incredible," he said, his voice soft. "Smart, passionate, always challenging me to be better." Shanice's eyes met his, a flicker of vulnerability passing through them, but she quickly looked away, her posture rigid. "You sound like you were close," Miles said, his gaze sharpening, a young man sensing more than he was told. Hunter nodded, careful not to overstep. "We were. Life got complicated." Shanice's silence was heavy, her fingers brushing her purse, a shield against the past. Hunter's heart ached to tell Miles the truth, to claim him as his son, but her warning held him back. Instead, he pointed to a sketch in Miles's notebook, a detailed drawing of a rare fern. "This is amazing," he said, forcing lightness. "You ever think about publishing these?" Miles grinned, his guard lowering. "Maybe. Mom says I should focus on my degree first." Lily chimed in, laughing. "Miles is always sketching. We worked on a project together last semester. He's obsessed with saving the planet." Her ease with Miles, their shared history as classmates, stirred a quiet envy in Hunter. He'd missed those years, those moments of connection. "You two make a good team," he said, his voice catching. Lily grinned. "Yeah, Miles is like family already." Shanice's eyes darted to Hunter, a warning flash, but her lips softened, a reluctant acknowledgement of the warmth in the moment. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, Shanice spoke, her voice low. "You're good with him, Hunter, but he's sensitive. He's got big dreams, and this," she gestured vaguely, meaning the media storm, "could ruin them." Her words cut, a reminder of the headlines, or the scrutiny threatening her son. Hunter's chest tightened, guilt surging. "I'm handling it," he said, his voice firm. "The interview with Wired will set things straight. No details about Miles, just us taking responsibility." Shanice studied him, her eyes searching for sincerity. "You'd better," she said, her tone softer but still edged with caution. "He's all I have." Miles turned back, his smile fading as he caught their tension. "Everything okay?" he asked, his hazel eyes flicking between them. Hunter forced a smile. "Just catching up with your mom." Miles nodded, but his gaze lingered, a young man sensing truths unspoken. As they parted, he offered a handshake, his grip firm. "Thanks for the walk, Hunter. It was cool." Hunter's heart leaped, a fragile bridge strengthened. "Any time," he said, his voice thick. Shanice's nod was reluctant, but her eyes held a glimmer of trust, a crack in her fortress. The soft rustle of leaves from the nature reserve lingered in Hunter Caldwell's mind. Miles' hesitant handshake, and Shanice's guarded nod, a fragile promise that fueled his resolve. Her words, "Miles deserves better than this," echoed as a challenge to prove himself under the relentless glare of the media storm. The headlines had exposed their secret, painting Miles as a scandal, and Shanice's fierce protectiveness had carved a hollow ache in his chest. Now, as he sat across from her in a dimly lit Palo Alto restaurant, the clink of cutlery and murmur of diners a faint backdrop to their tension, Hunter felt the weight of her scrutiny. Miles sat between them, his white skin catching the candlelight, hazel eyes flickering with curiosity. Tonight, a question hung unspoken, a truth waiting to break free, and Hunter's heart pounded with both dread and hope. Shanice's dark eyes, sharp yet weary, studied him over her glass of wine. Her braids framed her face, a quiet strength in her posture, but her fingers betrayed her unease, tracing the stem of the glass. Miles, in a crisp shirt, flipped through his notebook, its pages filled with sketches of plants, a distraction from the undercurrent of tension. Hunter's throat tightened. The memory of Miles' passion at the reserve, his talk of ecosystems, his shy smile, stirring a pride so fierce it hurt. He wanted to claim him, to be the father he'd failed to be, but Shanice's boundaries held him back, her trust a prize he hadn't yet earned. The restaurant's warmth felt stifling, each glance from Miles a reminder of the years he'd lost. "You've been quiet," Miles said, his voice breaking the silence, his hazel eyes meeting Hunter's with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Something up?" Hunter forced a smile, his heart racing. "Just enjoying the company," he said, his voice rough. Shanice's gaze sharpened, a silent warning, but her lips softened, a flicker of vulnerability passing through. Miles tilted his head, his dimples deepening. "Mom says you knew her at Stanford. You must have been close." The words were a probe, a young man sensing shadows beneath the surface. Hunter's chest ached, the truth clawing at him, but he glanced at Shanice, seeking her permission. She set her glass down, her fingers stilling, and took a deep breath. "Miles," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion, "there's something we need to tell you." Miles closed his notebook, his eyes narrowing, the air growing thick with anticipation. Hunter's pulse hammered, a mix of fear and longing flooding him. "Hunter's not just an old friend," Shanice continued, her dark eyes locking on her son's. "He's your father." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the restaurant's hum for Hunter. Miles's face froze, his hazel eyes wide, searching Shanice's, then Hunter's. "My father?" he whispered, his voice cracking, a young man grappling with a truth that reshaped his world. Hunter's heart twisted, the weight of Miles' shock a mirror to his own at the stadium. "I didn't know," he said, his voice raw, leaning forward. "Not until I saw you at graduation. I swear, Miles, I would have been there if I'd known." Miles' gaze darted to Shanice, hurt flashing across his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his tone sharp, a wound beneath his words. Shanice's eyes glistened, her hand reaching for his. "It was my choice," she said softly. "I was protecting you. Your grandmother, Hunter's mother, made it impossible for me to stay. She threatened to take you away." Her voice broke, the pain of those years spilling over, and Hunter's guilt surged, a bitter tide. Miles pulled his hand back, his white skin flushing, his dimples vanishing. "You kept this from me for 18 years?" he asked, his voice trembling with betrayal. Hunter's chest tightened, the urge to comfort him overwhelming, but he held back, respecting the space Shanice had guarded so fiercely. "I was wrong," Shanice admitted, her eyes pleading. "I thought I was keeping you safe. But you deserve the truth. Hunter's here now, and he wants to know you." Miles' gaze flicked to Hunter, a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, curiosity, swirling in his hazel eyes. "Why now?" he demanded, his voice low. "Because you saw me and felt guilty?" The accusation cut deep, a knife to Hunter's heart. "No," he said, his voice steady despite the ache. "Because you're my son, and I've missed every moment of your life. I want to make it right, if you'll let me." Miles' jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the notebook, its sketches a silent refuge. "I don't even know you," he muttered, his voice thick with hurt. Shanice reached for him again, but he shook his head, standing abruptly. "I need air," he said, striding toward the restaurant's patio, leaving Hunter and Shanice in a heavy silence. Hunter's hands trembled, the pain of Miles' rejection a physical blow. He looked at Shanice, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her strength faltering. "I should have prepared him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's sensitive, Hunter. This is too much." Hunter's heart ached for her, for the years she'd carried this burden alone. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Shanice's gaze softened, a flicker of trust breaking through her pain. "Then show up," she said, her voice firm. "Not just tonight, but every day. He needs a father, not a headline." Before Hunter could respond, Lily burst into the restaurant, her curly hair wild, her eyes bright. "Uncle Hunter, I saw Miles outside. Everything okay?" She paused, sensing the tension, then softened. "He's upset, but he was asking about you. Said you seemed familiar." Her words sparked a fragile hope in Hunter's chest, a lifeline to his son. "He's like you, you know," Lily added, grinning. "Stubborn, but good-hearted." Shanice managed a small smile, her hand brushing away a tear. "Go talk to him," she said to Hunter, her voice steady. "But be gentle." Hunter stepped onto the patio, the night air cool against his skin. Miles stood by a railing, his white skin pale under the moonlight, his notebook open to a sketch of a fragile plant. "Hey," Hunter said softly, his heart pounding. "I know this is a lot. I'm not here to push you." Miles looked up, his hazel eyes guarded but curious. "Mom said you didn't know," he said, his voice low. "Is that true?" Hunter nodded, his throat tight. "I'd have fought for you, Miles. I'm here now, if you'll give me a chance." Miles' gaze softened, a crack in his armor, and Hunter's heart lifted, a spark of connection in the darkness. The moonlight on the restaurant patio, where Miles' guarded hazel eyes had met Hunter Caldwell's, lingered like a quiet promise in his heart. The truth, Miles as his son, Shanice's sacrifice, had cracked open a wound, but also a hope, fragile yet fierce. Miles' question, "Why now?" and Shanice's tearful plea, "Show up every day," echoed as Hunter stood at an international airport, the sterile hum of departures, a stark contrast to the warmth he'd felt with his son. Evelyn Caldwell, his mother, stood before him, her designer coat immaculate, her face a mask of practiced calm. Her attempt to meet Miles had faltered. His blunt refusal, "She didn't care before," Why now? A mirror to Hunter's own pain. Now, as Evelyn prepared to board a flight to a distant retreat, Hunter's chest burned with resolve and regret, a father determined to rewrite his story. Evelyn's eyes, sharp and unyielding, met his. "Hunter, darling, this can be fixed," she said, her voice smooth as if Miles were a problem to be managed. "A statement to the press? A quiet settlement?" Hunter's rage flared, a white-hot flame. "He's my son, not a scandal," he snapped, his voice low but lethal. "You stole 18 years from me," threatened Shanice, tracked her like prey. Evelyn's composure wavered, her lips thinning. "I protected your future," she insisted, her tone brittle. "A child would have ruined everything." Hunter's fists clenched, his heart pounding with the weight of her betrayal. "You ruined my family," he said, his voice trembling. "Miles is my son, and you'll never control him like you did me." Miles' words at the restaurant haunted him, the hurt in his hazel eyes a knife to Hunter's soul. Evelyn had tried to visit, but her polished charm met with Miles' cold rebuff. "If she didn't want me then, I don't need her now." The rejection had stung her, but Hunter felt no pity. Her actions had carved this chasm. He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Go, mother. We're done here." Evelyn's gaze hardened, but she turned, her heels clicking toward the gate, her silhouette fading into the crowd. Hunter exhaled, a weight lifting, yet a hollow ache remained. He'd severed her hold, but the years she'd stolen were a wound that lingered, raw and unhealed. He drove to Palo Alto, the city's lights blurring through his windshield, his mind on Miles and Shanice. They'd agreed to move into neighboring homes, a practical step to give Miles stability while keeping boundaries. Hunter's new house, a modern haven with wide windows, stood next to Shanice's, a smaller but warm space she'd chosen for Miles. The arrangement was unconventional, but it felt right, a bridge to a family he longed to reclaim. As he parked, he saw Miles at the window, sketching in his notebook, his white skin catching the lamplight. Shanice stood behind him, her dark eyes soft but cautious, a mother guarding her son's heart. Hunter's chest tightened, a mix of love and fear flooding him. He knocked, and Shanice opened the door, her braids loose, her expression a blend of weariness and hope. "You're here," she said, her voice quiet but not cold. Miles looked up, his dimples faint as he offered a nod. "Hey, Hunter," he said, his tone still guarded, the word father unspoken. Hunter's heart ached. The distance between them was a chasm he yearned to cross. "Thought we could hang out," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Maybe take a walk?" Shanice hesitated, then nodded, her eyes searching his for sincerity. "A short one," she said, her hand brushing Miles' shoulder, a protective anchor. They strolled to a nearby park, the air cool, the paths lined with whispering trees. Miles walked ahead, his notebook tucked under his arm, pausing to examine a cluster of wildflowers. "These are rare," he said, his voice warming as he knelt, sketching their delicate petals. Hunter watched, pride swelling, the sight of his son's passion a mirror to his own forgotten dreams. "You've got an eye for detail," he said, kneeling beside him. Miles glanced up, his hazel eyes softening. "Mom says I overthink things," he admitted, a shy smile breaking through. Shanice's lips twitched, a flicker of warmth, but her eyes held a warning, her trust still fragile. Lily appeared, her curly hair bouncing as she jogged over, her energy cutting through the quiet. "Uncle Hunter! Miles, you didn't say you were hanging out," she teased, grinning. She studied them, then laughed. "You two are like twins. Same stubborn look." Miles rolled his eyes, but a blush crept up his white cheeks, his dimples deepening. Shanice tensed, her fingers clutching her jacket. But Hunter caught her gaze, silently promising to keep the truth safe. "Just a coincidence," he said lightly, though his heart raced at the bond forming before him. Lily nudged Miles, pulling him into a playful debate about their biology project, their ease a reminder of the years Hunter had missed. Shanice walked beside him, her silence heavy but not hostile. "He's starting to like you," she said quietly, her voice soft but edged with caution. "Don't let him down." Hunter's throat tightened, her words a lifeline and a challenge. "I won't," he said, his voice firm. "I've failed you both before, but not again." Her eyes met his, a glimmer of trust breaking through her guard, and for a moment he saw the Shanice he'd loved, fierce, vulnerable, unbroken. His heart ached to reach for her, but he held back, knowing trust was earned, not given. As they returned to the houses, Miles turned, his notebook open to a new sketch. "This was cool," he said, his voice tentative but genuine. "Can we do it again?" Hunter's heart leaped. A fragile bridge strengthened. "Anytime," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Shanice's nod was small, but her eyes held a quiet hope, a crack in her fortress. The park's tranquility enveloped them, but Hunter's heart raced with purpose. He'd faced Evelyn, severed her control, and now stood on the cusp of a family he'd never dreamed possible. Hunter, Shanice, and Miles' journey weaves a tapestry of heartbreak, redemption, and hope, unraveling secrets that bind a family. From a shocking reunion at Stanford Stadium to a fragile new beginning, their story grips the heart. What did you feel as Hunter faced his past? Did Miles' guarded trust move you, or Shanice's fierce love resonate? Share your thoughts below. What surprised you most? Vote 1 if this tale held you captive, 0 if it fell short. Thank you for joining this emotional ride, for feeling their pain and hope. Your thoughts fuel our stories, so keep sharing. Stay tuned for more tales that tug at the soul. Until next time, keep wondering, can broken bonds be mended? What truths await in the shadows of love?